Hi, I'm Judy Flagg. I am the historian for the town of Salem, and we're here today in the Revolutionary War Cemetery with Joe Ferrannini, who is here from Gravestone Matters, restoring several of the headstones here in the Revolutionary War Cemetery. Joe, so how did you get started in restoring gravestones?
Well, that's a long story, but I'll try to keep it brief for this talk. I think there's a lot of factors. How I got into actually working on stones was through an interest in genealogy and finding my own ancestors' stones in a bad state, and instead of complaining about it, I decided I would learn how to do proper repairs and conservation on them just for my own family. And in doing so, I found there was a lot of bad things that were done, and it really fired me up and got me inspired to have a preservation career. I had another career out of college, even though one of my majors in college was history. I didn't use that, so it kind of falls in step with that. If you don't teach history, what do you do with a history major? So you can be a gravestone conservator with the proper training, and it's just been a fabulous thing. I also attribute it to family values and upbringing. My grandmother was actually born in a cemetery, so it might actually be genetic. Her father was a caretaker at Oakwood Cemetery in Troy, and she was born in one of the caretakers' houses there. So it's about upbringing, it's about genealogy, it's about a lot of things that brought me into this.
Joe, how many years have you been restoring headstones?
Well, as a professional, this is my 15th year, but I learned for many years before that from various sources. Before I felt I'm not a university-trained conservator, so I wanted to make sure I was learning from as many varied sources to do it properly, because there's a lot of bad things being done out there, and I didn't want to be part of the problem. I wanted to be part of the solution. So probably over 20 years total, but 15 years as a professional.
And you've been here in this cemetery several times before.
Yes, this is at least the third or fourth time that I've been here over the last 6 or 7 years.
Mm-hmm. We're working here today. Joe is working here today in this area, and I'll let him explain what he's doing with this particular stone.
Okay, so we're here today working on Robert C. Thompson. He died in 1840 at age 27 years. His stone has been repaired more than once in the past, and this time we hope to make it a more permanent, lasting repair, although nothing is permanent. He had been put in a base of concrete, which is one of the worst things you can do, because these stones need to have some movement, and by embedding in concrete, it makes it so immovable that if anything impacts it, it breaks, which it did. After it broke, it was repaired at least one more time, and that has failed as well. They used an epoxy that was attaching the stone to the base. That all failed, had to be removed by hand with hammer and chisel. The next project will be figuring out if this concrete can be removed or if we have to make a new base and move forward with this conservation effort. Whatever we do, we want it to be reversible, but it needs to be long-lasting at the same time. So this will be epoxied using a proper stone epoxy, and the rest of the treatment will be determined once we do more examination. This is one of the first stones that I worked on in this session. It's a simple tablet-style stone. It's basically one long slab of marble. 1/3 of it is in the ground, 2/3 out of ground. That's what keeps it supported. It was basically just been uprooted by the frost, was laying face down. It's a matter of digging out the soil, placing it back in, compacting the soil, putting her at a proper height, making sure she's level and plumb. Much simpler than fixing something like the stone next to it, which is the same name, Rachel B Danforth, but it's not her daughter. It's her husband's second wife's daughter, named after her. She passed away, and probably the firstborn daughter was named in memory of the late wife. Her stone was in multiple pieces, as you can see, and was in the ground behind the original Rachel B stone. I originally thought it was a footstone laying there, and as I excavated it out, found multiple pieces and was able to put it back together. There's actually a new concrete base is made underground. It's mortared in with a soft lime mortar. And the rest of the conservation treatment will be to fill all those cracks, to keep the water out of there in the wintertime so it doesn't get in there, freeze, and break it apart. And in doing so, we can replicate everything to the shape. If it's through the inscription, I can actually duplicate that at the same time, carving out the letters to keep the inscription visible for the future. So this one still has several hours worth of work on it just to finish all the patching. But it's a stone that hasn't been seen in many years. It was down in really bad shape. Next to this one, we have another tablet. This was had been repaired in the past. Basically, it was pretty level in the ground, pretty plumb. The repair had failed, fell face first. The repair had to be removed, re-epoxied, and then that joint still gets infilled as well with a lime patching material. So standing next to this limestone monument, it's rather unusual. Limestone generally isn't used for gravestones because it does not hold carving as well as marble. Marble and limestone are in the same family, but marble holds up, takes a carving much better. This stone was chosen because it was leaning dangerously. It was sitting on a slate foundation. This middle cap was broken in half with this obelisk sitting on top. It could have toppled over and hurt anybody very easily, so it was a priority due to that. When I started working on this, I kind of questioned why I was even working on it, because there's no visible carving. It's like looks like a blank monument. There's nothing visible to the naked eye. But as I worked on it, disassembled it, cleaned it, the light from the day changed with sunlight shifting. And on this side here, this face actually has an inscription for Susanna Stone, who died in 1809 in her 52nd year. And on the front side over here, there's a great willow tree, weeping willow, that can only be seen in the right lighting condition, which, based on the position of this monument, is usually not the case. It's on the north side, so it almost never gets the right light to be visible. It was all disassembled, reassembled on a base of crushed stone to allow for proper drainage, put back together with a lime mortar that's been tinted. This lime mortar is still pretty fresh, so it's dark. It will lighten up to be almost the exact color of this. It'll blend in. And now this monument should be good for another few decades before anything else needs to happen to it.
So Joe was invited here by the town of Salem, who owns this property, as well as the Dr. Asa Fitch Historical Society. The donations to the Historical Society are what make possible the restoration of the stones in this cemetery. And Joe will probably be able to work on about
somewhere around 20, maybe 24 stones. We're based on funding, so extra donations are always welcome. It's a tedious, long-term process. Things do not happen overnight for the neglect, and they don't get fixed overnight. So some stones may take only a couple hours, some stones may take an entire day to fix. So we're hoping to get as many done as we can. We picked ones that were dangerous like this one, and other ones that have been down and were in a danger to themselves by laying on the ground, being run over by lawnmowers every 2 weeks, and just trying to save the history while it's still here.